Everybody has wondered if human civilization will come to an end one day and how that might happen. So I asked Chat GPT what the greatest threats to mankind are, and I asked it to put it in order from lowest to highest probability. And the list in this video is what it came up with. It said that while it might not pose a direct existential threat to humanity, it could be a stepping stone to one of the more serious scenarios on this list. It made me think of the historical event in 1983 where one man's quick thinking basically prevented a nuclear holocaust. In September 1983, a man named Stanislav Petrov was faced with a significant choice. All the alarms were going off, indicating that 5 U.S. intercontinental ballistic missiles were inbound. And he had the choice to either inform his superiors that this was happening or decide that it was a false alarm. And his quick thinking was that if it was only 5 missiles, and if the U.S. wanted to start a nuclear war with Russia, it would have sent more than 5 missiles. So he decided that it was a false alarm and didn't inform his superiors. If he had, they would have likely launched a counterattack, which would have caused a cascade of nuclear launches, maybe all over the world. This one's pretty serious. I'm surprised it's only number 9. It's really easy to imagine scenarios where a cybersecurity attack could bring down the whole of society. Not just ours, but maybe globally even. Like, for example, so much depends on a consistent flow of energy into our homes and businesses. The energy industry actually experiences the most amount of cyber attacks out of any industry. It's mostly hackers just holding the system hostage for ransom. But if it were an attack from a significant foreign adversary like Russia or China, then it could quickly bring our country to its knees. This one is pretty terrifying, especially since there are so many proponents of depopulation among powerful leaders all over the world.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population. Because if where we are, there's nothing else.
And do you have views about what should be done about that?
Can't you guess?
There were experiments done demonstrating how bacteria made its way slowly through thicker and thicker sections of antibiotics. Each time that the bacteria breached through to the next section, it was because it mutated to become more resistant. If somebody did something like that with the Black Plague or another serious disease and then used it as a weapon, that could wipe out huge portions of the global population. This one doesn't really seem like it could threaten mankind by itself. It seems like more along the lines of being like a side effect of one of the other scenarios. And if it happens, then it's going to exacerbate the problems of whatever the scenario is. Imagine if something did cause global protests and or riots, that it could get out of hand pretty quickly for the institutions that are responsible for maintaining law and order. And it would probably take a really long time to restore things back to normal, even if they even could be. First thing that comes to mind in regard to resource scarcity for most people is probably water, right? Fresh water. But it's a non-issue. It's a non-problem for people who understand desalination and how much energy that takes. It's not much. It's absurdly cheap and efficient. So, you get some tidal energy going on the shore and have that energy used for desalination. You could easily get water to billions of people with that method. A big one that could happen any year now, and I think is much more likely than the water scarcity, is rubber. There is a disease that's affecting rubber crops, the trees. It's highly contagious and hard to get rid of. And it spreads fast, and like a lot of it, it's not hit the main crops of rubber, but if it were to, man, rubber is connected to everything. It's like a huge part of the economic ecosystem, and it would affect the global economy in a big way and have far-reaching consequences that we probably can't even calculate. I know my first thought for this one was when Elon Musk said that AI is actually a greater threat to humanity than nuclear war. And I don't think we're all that far away from creating a sentient artificial intelligence. But I, perhaps foolishly, am hopeful that they will create it in a way that benefits us and doesn't harm us. There is, of course, the possibility of its misuse. For example, there was a lot of people who got around the built-in parameters of Chat GPT with simply cleverly worded prompts. And those were meant to protect people from harmful responses from the chatbot, but they got around them. It could be that AI in the future is trained to be a weapon, essentially, by other humans against other humans, not that it's like a rogue AI or something. This is, in my opinion, one of the scariest ones on the list. The entire planet is covered with complex networks of interconnected species forming ecosystems that we barely understand. And it could be that these networks form a strong regenerative structure of connections. But it also could be like a Jenga tower, and we, as the human species, are unknowingly about to pull out the block that knocks over the whole thing. We just don't know a lot. There's just too much information spread over too much area. And I believe that the amount that we are contributing to the number of species going extinct every year is ultimately negligible. Like, it exists, but there's already so many species going extinct every year just naturally that our contribution to that is like nothing. But that being said, I could definitely see it being something that could bring our entire civilization to a screeching halt if we are not careful in the coming centuries. I'm a little surprised that it had this one at number 3. I guess it kind of makes sense, especially with the Ukrainian conflict. It's had a lot of people worried that nuclear war might be right around the corner. I read somewhere at some point, I couldn't find it, but that the threat of nukes is a lot like a bunch of people in a pool full of gasoline threatening each other with matches. I love that analogy. It, if one person lights their match, everyone's dead. And in that sense, it's more of a deterrent than anything. It's we don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that, right? And besides, there's a superior weapon. You may not have heard of it. You may have heard of it. It's called the Rod of God, or Rods of God. It's basically a giant tungsten rod that's shot from a satellite in outer space, and it creates a kinetic blast similar to a nuclear bomb, but without the nuclear fallout, no radiation. This one's pretty much the same as number 8, except for accidental. And 2020 was pretty rough for everybody. So if something like that happens again and it's worse than in 2020, it's really not a stretch, or it's not hard to imagine that it could completely shut down the global economy, which would be catastrophic. Yep, you probably saw it coming. It's not really surprising that Chat GPT thinks that climate change is the number 1 threat to mankind. Because of who created the chatbot, it reveals a clearly liberal bias inherent within the language model. I personally no longer believe that climate change is as much of a threat as they say it is. I mean, scientists in the 70s were saying that by the year 2000, if we don't stop putting CO2 in the atmosphere, Florida is going to be underwater. It feels more like a vehicle for certain people to push agendas that wouldn't otherwise get the same level of support. I am aware that that is a hot take, and if you feel you have some evidence or even proof that man's contribution to the CO2 parts per million in the atmosphere is not negligible compared to the natural rate of change, post it in the comments. Post a link in the comments to whatever studies you have. I will check them out. I have an open mind. Like, I actually used to be vegan because of this idea. I watched Cowspiracy and I was like, holy moly, we all need to be vegan so we can save the planet. just don't believe that anymore. I have seen too much evidence to the contrary. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Hit that bell for more. And as always, memento mori, or remember death. The stoic practice of reminding ourselves of the impermanence of all things in order to live fuller lives and cultivate gratitude for the time that we have left. Alrighty, bye-bye.